So, well, great question, Sanna. I will tell you what it's about. We are now live, and we are going to be going through the Keirsey INFP profile, and you have the opportunity to complain about it. Just one moment. The slate has gone off, and it will create a weird feedback thing. So it's like we can. I'm welcome to, because it's not just about. It's about going through the profile, critiquing the profile, things that it brings up with Monika. And Monika has a fantastic story. Please, Monika, tell us about you and the tank.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if it's a fantastic story. However, I have to begin with a video. Ben sent me a link for some videos about tanks and about war. And I wasn't sure what was his reason to send me that. And I was thinking that maybe he is trying to get me more into atmosphere of an ethic and questions related to ethics of war. Is it bad or is it good to war? And what tanks are, what is symbolics of the war and things like that. And I promised him the story about those tanks, and it's a very silly story. I was in Calgary last year in one military museum, and I saw those tanks. And hey, Ben, I think it's really embarrassing to tell the story because, and I wasn't even drunk or anything like that, but I just saw these tanks and I felt like they were evil, you know, and and they were standing there, the huge mass of iron, and I just wanted to cry. And then there were those sad models of people who were injured. Those plastic people, and they were crying, and there were small plastic children crying and with their dying parents. And I was crying, and because I felt it was so sad, and I guess it's a little weird, but I have some sort of sympathy with these objects. They are not live. And well, my husband, he was just, what is she doing? What is this? Just come on, just continue. It's just a museum, you know? And I knew that, but I think it was very, very sad. So that was the tank story. And now I'm embarrassed.
Oh, that's okay. Because it's because you were considering INTP or INFP. Now, sometimes I do think, because I do follow this very carefully, tanks, planes, submarines, I do think, oh, this is all cool, but it is a terrible waste to spending all this money on this, on these boys' toys stuff. But it's still cool.
Well, I think that unless you don't want to buy a whole real tank, then it can't be so expensive.
They cost millions. But,
okay.
Yeah, but the reason why I sent it to you is because I wanted to show, well, I'm going to be busy for the next 6 minutes, and this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm watching this video.
Yeah, this was one of those possibilities what I was thinking about your reasons were.
Yeah, because it's that particular YouTuber I really like, and he's an endorsed channel. It's Red Effect.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. But, you know, this is really, I think that really to have this kind of sympathy with this suffering, even with inanimate subjects. Well, for example, I also have a sympathy even for, well, abandoned toys or articles that no one reads. I just think it's sad. And I just think it's some kind of personification of the suffering in these objects. And one friend of mine, he told me that he actually thinks it's a sort of pathology. If you sympathize with something what is not alive.
No,
But I don't think it.
no, it's
I
because
don't see it this
it's
way.
what it represents, and what it represents is real. Now, in terms of that, when you said a toy, now they would do this. Now there was a Channel 4 satirical news series called "Drop the Dead Donkey," and they criticized one of the journalists because every time there was like a humanitarian disaster, he would put a little cuddly teddy bear somewhere in the rubble, and he says, "And over here, we see a children's toy." And so it was like just like this idea of like him putting that same thing in there and maybe just doing it. Like, do people do that in real life? Because it was a little bit of an exaggeration of how the news works. But recently, here's the thing, folks. Here is a thing, and this is relevant. Just so recently, it was revealed that the chemical attack in Douma was faked. Well, I already knew it was fake because of various things, but one of the people that was there confirmed it, and he actually worked for the BBC, and the BBC tried to shut him down. So I posted that on Facebook, and I'll post it in the description later on. So that's ethical stuff, because initially it was just Alex Jones saying it was fake because there was just bad acting going on in the video. And then they actually had the kid that was supposedly injured, and then the kid said, oh, they gave me some money to do it. Anyway, so back to this. All right, okay, here we go. So, because you mentioned Directive and Informer before we went live, and so we've got the informative role of advocate. Again, harmonious interaction. Harmonious interaction. The informative role of advocate of harmonious interaction. FINI means INFP considers the consequences of their views on the feelings of others. That's my assumption. Oh, right. Okay. I'm saying functionally, in that I've sort of extrapolated that from INTP in the idea that INTP's got this background NI thing going on, this intuition of time. And it's like, oh, what are the consequences of this? And it's the thing that stops us from acting in the moment because we see how things can go wrong, how things can escalate. And so I'm wondering that INFP also, with that ability to see consequences, that FI working with NI, it's like, oh, I can see also because they are sensitive, they can see the impact of things on other people and how things can be, things can snowball into that. So that's basically me trying to come up with a functional justification for that line about the harmonious interaction and thinking that it has something to do with the creative NI. So Keirsey does have the NFPs being about this harmonious interaction thing. And ethics of relations tends to be very similar to that. Now, my personal opinion is that the actual Jungian FI, the subjective feeling, is sort of the basis of that. That is a separate discussion, and the ethics of relations, to my mind, is just one aspect of subjective feeling. It's just the way FINX, so the healer and EII, interacts with other people, and that it is based on a subjective feeling, and that I think that because it is based on that, an INFP can feel alienated if they're just around people that they cannot connect with. Because to them, if all of their connections are based on, if all of their contacts with people are based on their level of connection, if they don't have that level of connection with people, they're going to feel rather lonely. And Carl Jung wrote about this, about the type, the introverted feeling is the type that does not express itself, or rather, I think I would phrase it like this, that at least the ones that he was seeing in therapy might not be able to express themselves well in terms of expressing their feelings. Maybe the more as society has developed, those INFPs maybe get better at expressing that through art and writing and things like that. And so there's a little difference now in how people view INFPs from the way Carl Jung viewed the FI Dom, because he viewed it as a type that found it very hard to express their feelings. Whereas now, people would say that INFP is one of the best types at talking about their feelings. So there's a little difference there in the theory.
Yeah, I think they can be the best ones who are able to talk about their feelings if they want to share that. But it's not always the case.
Yeah.
So
I think that people need to remember, and even Carl Jung himself said that his profiles and his choice of functions were not a priori, but they were based on his experience. The problem being, though, his experience was based on meeting people in therapy. So a lot of the people he would have encountered would be based on the unhealthy versions of all of, you know, the people he comes across. So maybe he didn't come across that many healthy because the FI DOMs he did come across were the ones he met in therapy. So now, so going through this, right, so here we go. Let's see how this goes with their ethics of relation. So to the INFP, healing means, so he changed healing to reconciler because healing sounds a little bit too practical, a little bit too like SFJ, physical caring kind of thing. So he changed this to the reconciler. So reconciling alienates. To the INFP, healing means mending those divisions that plague one's private life and one's relationships. Okay, so this is when Dario wrote about bringing conflicting beliefs into harmony, that kind of thing. So how does that first sentence strike you, Monika? Mending divisions that plague one's private life and one's relationships.
well, I think that when there is conversation with some individual, and when this conversation gets private, it's the part when I feel the most strong, when I can speak about their relationships and probably their problems. I would say that the more it can go into depth, the better for me, because I'm not very good at small talk. And when there is a topic, even serious one, about problems and about serious issues, it's more easier for me to talk about it.
Right.
Because it's more easy to navigate myself with these topics.
Interesting. Because there's, and so I would think from that, when you're talking about those topics that you're more comfortable with, you have more of a connection to those topics. So you like stronger feelings about them. Whereas with small talk, I'm not interested.
Well, I think that I learned small talk to be some kind of challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, how long am I able to generate those silly questions and topics? I think it can be a sort of a game, or at least I had to start to think about it in this way to be it easier, because small talking, it's a huge part of everyday life, unfortunately. So you probably, yeah.
I was just going to say, Sanna, if there's any point you want to jump in and ask a follow-up question of Monika, feel free. Just talking about this, so Jeff, I think Jeff's a very entertaining person. However, he has done a video called, and it's quite a moving video. It's called "Is People Search for Extrovert Does Not Mean Social Wizard." Jeff actually talks about his the problems he has had with communicating with people. So being FI ego does not necessarily, I mean, you'd think from the name, oh, ethics of relations, they instantly know how to interact with people. No, it's not about that. It's only if there's a connection there. And part of Jeff's nature is, and he said last night in a video, he's a bit of a contrarian. So when you're naturally a contrarian, that can get in the way of rapport. It's hard to get rapport when you're a contrarian, unless you're somebody else who has similar points of view. So that's a very good video, folks. And he did a video called ESFP Preference versus Reality, where all of the things about what the ESFP wanted in the Keirsey profile, he agreed with, but he didn't agree with the specific behaviors because of lack of opportunity. So that's just an example to show that extrovert does not equal social wizard. And FI ego does not equal social wizard. But I think that's a great example of what you said there, Monika. When it gets down to the deep issues, that's where you can talk best, converse best, and that's also a strength of INFJ.
Yeah, I think that for some people, maybe it's weird because they know me for just a little while. They just don't know me for a long time, but I think it's not uncommon for me people to share their stories with me. And I think that probably Sanna have the same experience with people.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I just mentioned that there are quite a lot of people who are feeling comfortable to telling their stories to me. And
yeah, that seems to be a thing. I don't know if it's an NF thing or is it just some of us, but it definitely happens spontaneously.
Yeah.
Keirsey
No, I just want to say
go on.
That even if I never really see them, there is this kind of connection they have to me. It doesn't have to be other way. I still can have the mental barrier to them, but it seems they don't have the same to me.
Go on.
What do you mean that they don't have the same?
Well, I meant that I wouldn't necessarily tell them everything about me, but they seem to do that. It's not likewise.
So have you actually confirmed your type now? Because I haven't talked to you for a while.
Oh yeah. Well, I think Ben. Can I say that or?
See what? See my face? What? Oh, see this? Oh, if you click on the square.
Oh no. I mean, I can definitely. If I can reveal what is my type right now, or
yeah, you're fine with that. Yeah.
Or if we are keeping this revelation for.
No, I'll put it in the title. I'll put it in the title like Monika E4 Socionics EII. So yeah, it's sort of a cat's out of the bag.
Oh, it's there. I didn't notice it.
It's right at the end. Some people might not see it, but
okay. So
that's just my typing. But there was many various typings, and you could mention that, Monika, like what various people have said. I think you said, I don't know if you want to talk about it, like you said that some people tested you in Czech Republic, some Czech.
Oh yeah. They were a lot of typings to me, and I was also at some seminars about Socionics, and I had meetings with those lectors or profilers of Socionics, and the one said I was EII, and the second said I was no, wait a minute. Because in Czech, there's E and I letters, and they are pronouncing very similar as those English. So
yeah, that's a problem for the Russians with the Chi code. So it's not just me, because it's like I to us, II to Russian is E.
Yeah,
Because the Russian letter E gets transliterated to I.
Yeah, that's the same, I guess.
Yeah.
So in Czech it's EE, so it's EIE in English.
Yeah. So someone touches lyric. Yeah.
Yes. It was, in fact, it was interesting because the profiler, he told me it's very clear for me to be EII, but then he saw my mother and he typed her as EII instead and thought that I have to be something different. But with second profiler, we came out that probably my mom is totally different type. So EII is probably better profile for me. It was very thorough conversation. It lasted for 5 hours.
Right.
And I think it was a good interview with her.
So for the people watching, in case they're not familiar with Socionics, EII is very similar to the Keirsey healer, and Socionics EII, so intuitive ethical introvert, is very similar to the Keirsey counselor, because the counselor is directive, and so that sort of corresponds to beta quadra directive kind of values, and ethics of relations sort of corresponds to the informing, mediating nature of the interaction style of Keirsey NFPs.
Yeah, although there are still huge fights between those who think the conversion is real.
Well, they're talking about MBTI types. I focus on the Keirsey types, and also because the types that Dario Nardi deals with are based on the Behrens ones, and the Behrens ones are based on the Keirsey ones to such an extent that they even use the same names. So, for example, Keirsey's promoter, the ESTP, is called the promoter expediter by Linda Behrens, and then in personology, he calls it the expediter promoter. So they're pretty much using the same, although there are differences. And basically it's very similar. So it's almost like a tree that goes from Keirsey, Behrens to Nardi. Except that Behrens also did functions, and she innovated a few things about functions. Like, so she wrote some things. Basically, it's in these papers that were just sort of written for other typologists, sort of like bulletin messages kind of things, like these sort of insider magazines. And it was articles like tandem dynamics about how the dual functions work in tandem, things like that. So how about that healing inner divisions, Monika? Is that a focus of yours?
Healing of divisions?
Yeah, because it's got their internal and ones with relationships.
I'm not sure if I know what it means.
Yeah, Jeff said that Keirsey tends to make the NF chapter a bit more NF, the NT chapter a bit more NT, and that he sort of adapted the way he wrote the chapter to suit who he thought would be reading it. So, okay, what I'll do, it looks like he's elaborating upon that line in the next scan, so I'll push on. It means treating oneself and relating to others in a conciliatory manner, helping to restore lost unity, integrity, or what INFPs call oneness. These healers present a tranquil and noticeably pleasant face to the world, but while to all appearances they might seem gentle and easygoing, on the inside they are anything but serene, having a capacity for caring not usually found in other types. That matches up with the Keirsey humanist, that we went through last week. Healers care deeply, passionately about a few special persons or a favorite cause, and their fervent aim is to bring peace to the world and wholeness to themselves and their loved ones. That's super INFP.
Yeah, it sounds very nice and probably a little idealistic, I guess. But, you know, I would say that I was like this when I was younger.
Yeah.
Full of a lot of ideals about ideal world, about utopia. But okay, let's dive in this. I think that what I do is trying to listen to these individuals. I'm not very good with groups, but when I have an individual, I'm really trying to listen to their troubles, to their problems, and just trying to encourage them to be themselves. Because I think that when you are not yourself, then you can't even wait, or you can't even. Well, here's the thing: if you are not yourself, then people really can't like the real you. They really see just your mask and someone else, so you never can be sure that they really like you or your fake self. And I think it's not good for anyone to pretend something. Yeah.
I'll just say that with these profiles, I think that David Mark Keirsey once said that that there's quite a bit of the writing style of Stephen Montgomery. So he was another author, and he worked as editor on this book. And the next book, well, the next book after the next book, Personology, is more INTP-ish. So there's certain bits, although it's still Keirsey. It's just, I'm just saying that he had some help writing the book in terms of the style of the book. So, and Stephen Montgomery was also interested in temperament.
Yeah, I also think that these sentences are a combo of Enneagram type 4 and 9.
Right.
Gentle and easygoing to be more like Enneagram 9, but
a bit of one in there.
Integrity, it's more Enneagram 4, I guess.
A little bit of one, but without the sort of the judgy aspect.
Yeah, but peace to the world. It's definitely a 9, I would guess.
I mean, I've compared this to, when you compare it with the counselor profile, folks, there is hardly anything in the counselor profile about ethics, except the bit where it says that the ethics of the counselor are complicated, and they see moral issues in shades of day and they're good at, and it sort of talks about the ethics of the counselor in context of them dealing with complicated individuals because they're complicated themselves.
I think it means more that it's not a set system. It's being constantly refined in the moment as issues come up. Everything is taking into account, and those things change. It's the dynamic IEI outlook, I suppose, if there is a correlation.
And you could also say that if you use Dario Nardi's definition of extroverted sensing, immersing yourself in the present context and being in the situation, that adapting to the situation as things up, that sort of like fits in with that definition of extroverted sensing.
Yeah, I suppose. I'm hardly ever aware of being in the moment, as in I can't really pinpoint when that happens, but I think it has an effect on how I operate.
I think because I see the NiFx, the Keirsey INFJ, the IEI, as a type that is so, it's like there is such a big difference between their auxiliary function, FE, and their lead function, NI, in terms of NI being the most subjective function, the function that's most about you, and FE, the most about other people, or even just the emotions of other people. And so that is a large gap between going between those two modes.
But FE isn't just about other people. It's also your own emotional state and expressing it. So it's more like the dynamic behind emotional interaction between yourself and others, but it can be any variation of those.
Yeah. I just think there's a bigger gap between, say, NI and FE than between TI and NE. So in terms of, because you get in terms of behavior with the counselors, it's like one moment they are with people and are focused on people and helping people in the sort of the unofficial counseling role, or even official, and then the next they want to be really alone and cut themselves off and do the NI thing. So those two things are far apart. And in terms of the extroverted sensing, well, when you are guiding somebody else, you have to be focused on that person. So I suppose that's an idea. That would be an example of you being in the moment because of the person's involved.
Yeah. It's definitely, yes, it's true, but it's very I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of doing it. If I look back, I can see that, yeah, that was probably it. But in the moment, I don't really know that I'm doing it.
I suppose it's a little bit like when somebody's acting and they're really in the moment and reacting as the character and not looking at themselves and not self-conscious, they're not really aware of it because they're so much in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think INFP can do that. I think INFP, when working with somebody they're helping out because they could do the similar things. So it's the slightly different counseling approaches with INFP and INFJ, with EII and IEI, and that would be, in my opinion, the IEI, the Keirsey INFJ, would be in the moment of the person's emotions coming off, and the emotions and the words and in that context. And so they're in the moment of those emotions, plus they're also going to do the subjective thing, the subjective feeling thing, because it's a strong unvalued function in Keirsey INFJ, in IEI. I think that with INFP, EII, they've got FE ignoring, so they are going to be able to read the emotions, but for them, I believe that there's going to be more of trying to do the connection thing with people, imaginatively put themselves into the shoes of the client. Just a little bit difference in emphasis between subjective and objective, between the two, I would think, just based on what is more of a preference for one over the other. And then maybe a little bit of difference between the NE and the NI and how that's used. That's going to come. I think I once said to Crystal that it's tricky because you end up getting two types doing the same thing, but the slightly different way. And we are speculating a lot about what's going on inside someone's head with the cognitive processes, but that's how I imagine it would be based on the functions at play.
I think when you're doing something that you feel drawn to, it's like you're calling something you're really good at or something you really want to do. going to be a challenge, and you're going to be using everything that you possibly can. All the aspects of your psyche that you can possibly utilize in that moment.
There's a concept in, it's not really an NLP thing, it's an Annie Linden thing. She has this concept of fair witness, where you're able to put your own feelings to one side. And I think that a well-developed INFP can do that. And so it's like putting themselves in a fair witness position with a client. And maybe the less healthy INFPs are going to be, there's more like baggage, there's more subjective baggage, I believe, to get through. But I think that's more to do with, and I suppose it depends on the INFP, doesn't it? Like how much subjective baggage they have with FI versus those with a little bit more NE. You know, say, well, I can see it from this point of view and that point of view and put my own personal ethics to one side. So it will vary by individual.
Well, I read somewhere that it's about mirroring feelings and emotions with INFPs, with mirroring emotions of other people.
Rapport,
And I would think that some people could say that it's not very authentic if you just mirror someone's emotions. But I think that if you are able to mirror something, you have to feel it once yourself. So it's very, very authentic because you have this experience for yourself.
Yeah, that's one of the natural things that happens with rapport. Now, this has been turned into a technique by NLP, where it's like people can mechanistically copy other people, and some of them get really good at it, where it's like they're not just mimicking somebody else's body language. Oh no, they'll do something more subtle, like matching breathing rate.
Yeah, I think that you have an access. You just need to have it in yourself, inner somewhere.
Now, you can get weird situations where in the effort for somebody to match somebody, they might end up listening more and then therefore empathizing more, which means they don't have to do it mechanistically. It might just come out with natural feeling. One of the things that came up within this Keirsey profile is that he generally describes the introverts as attentive. I actually think that applies more to the feeling introverts, that they're emotionally attentive to other people, and so that's why they can pick up on things. I don't remember why I thought of that, but it was something about what you said. Yes, that was it. That was it. Yes, that's exactly it. Why people talk to you and they feel that you're listening is they feel that you're attentive. And I reckon that that's a common thread with all of the feeling introverts. So ISFJ, ISFP, INFP, and INFJ. Because they feel that the person they're talking to is attentive. I don't just think that's an introverted thing. I think that's the feeling introverts. So that's why they might, and all of the feeling introverts have strong, in the models of the feeling introverts, they have strong FI. Either FI Dom or FI creative. So SEI EII would be FI creative, and ESI and EII would be FI Dom. There we go. So we're getting slightly off track, and it's my own fault.
No, it's not. We were encouraging you by our experiences, I guess.
So what I can do is I can ask Sanna. So that first paragraph that's at the top of the page, is that consistent with ethics of relations?
Well, the first part is, I think, because it is about
There's a little bit more of that on this bit here, when it talks about relationships and that lot.
Yeah, I can see it's kind of indirectly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's like 101.
Yeah.
But it is something that I would expect to see.
Yeah. Especially when you get, like, say, the Wikisocion EII profile, and then within the first paragraph, it's talking about ethics.
As your note says, some of this is more SI related.
Yeah.
Because they value SI.
Yeah, and we saw that in Victor's. Victor especially has the his version of EII, the humanist. His ethics of forgiveness, the FI plus, is very much stimulated by seeing suffering in other people. So yeah, peace to the world. I
don't know enough EIIs to actually know how they present themselves to the world. I know that if they're not healthy, they don't present themselves very pleasantly at all. So yeah, it depends. But it is part of FI valuing types in my experience and as per the theory that they're not necessarily, they don't feel it's necessarily to externally express their feelings to the same degree that FE valuing types do. Because I do. I mean, whatever I'm feeling, people tend to know, because if they can't see it, I will tell them. And it's a very, like, I have to do it, kind of. I mean, you've probably noticed it too.
Yep.
I tell you. So.
What I'm gonna do is just gonna show folks what I mean about the difference between these two types, and about how little ethics and these kind of things are mentioned in the counselor profile. Just copied those across. Just
well, if I can just say some little observation maybe, or some feeling that I have.
Go for it.
Because there is a sentence about how INFPs are presenting themselves as gentle and easygoing, but on the outside they are anything but that. I think that in some way this is very inauthentic. And it's sort of paradox, because they're trying to be, or they want to be authentic, but in fact they're just trying to be nice and gentle and do not show their real feelings to the world. So then they can be like really, it can be a huge battle inside of them.
Well, not everything's going to trigger them. I mean, until they get triggered, they're going to be accommodator.
No, that's for everyone. Every single person that ever lived is like that. So, but I do think there's a difference, because if you compare it to IE, for example, the extroverted version, extroverted delta NF, they are very expressive, but they don't like to necessarily express if they're feeling something negatively, in my opinion. They seem to have a strong preference for the positive expression. Yeah. Which you could also argue is not necessarily a representative of how they genuinely feel. So
go on.
It's kind of it's a balance, and different types approach it differently. I think when you have FI and SI, Socionics obviously.
Yep.
I think you have a tendency to prefer kind of smooth interactions instead of beta NFs, for example, because we're not gonna hide the crap. We're just gonna basically throw it at your face if we're comfortable, obviously. So that's just what I've observed.
Yeah. There's a. I'm just doing a quick diagram here. That's not right. Yeah, that should be an I. People should be able to see this. I hope they can. So this is the model G of ENFP. You can see there it's a strong creative FE. So they can get trapped in that. ENFP. And like I said, there is a theme with ENFP between being authentic and wanting acceptance and approval.
Yeah, and smooth interactions.
Yeah.
Because I think SI really wants to have harmonious relations with people.
Yeah, and also they want to, and just because they live in a sensing world, they want to fit in. They do want to find their place in the world. And it takes them a while to develop that extroverted thinker.
I think that's going to be personal. Some people are going to be like that and others are not, because it depends on how you grew up too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, for instance, Carol Linden's a great example. Her mother, a very strong TE user. And so Carol had strong TE related capabilities forced upon her at a young age.
And I think that this is also something where, if I can bring a little bit of Enneagram into this.
Go on, Monika. The floor is yours.
Okay, that this is probably some area where Enneagram types different than 6 can be mistyped as 6, because those people who are idealist temperament, they want to fit in with these people who are different than them, and they don't want to be like in this alienation, and they want to belong, or at least they don't want to be rejected. So there is this wish to be accepted for who they are, which could seem very similar to Enneagram 6 need to belong.
Yeah. Yeah, the 6 is, that can have a big influence on things. So I'm just going to show people for comparison. So all of the, I think I've mentioned all the ethics stuff in green. So this is INFJ. And this is about the most it mentions about ethics. Bluntly is this bit here. These seclusive and friendly people are complicated themselves and so can understand and deal with complex ethical issues and with deeply troubled individuals. I don't think there's anything else there about it. Now, oh yes, I've made a little note. I'm going to have to turn it round and I'll read this out. So I did this a while ago and it sort of smudged a bit. And then this is in comparison to the healers. Healers have profound sense of idealism derived from a strong personal morality, and they conceive of the world as an ethical, honorable place. That is in stark contrast to this bit here. Complicated themselves and so can understand and deal with complex ethical issues and with deeply troubled individuals. So it's a lot different from the way Keirsey sees INFP as more morally clear, moral clarity a little bit. So again here, for healers have a profound sense of idealism derived from a strong personal morality, and they conceive of the world as an ethical, honorable place. So you can see the FI there, the subjective feeling. I don't think he mentions anything else about ethics in this profile of INFJ, but he does mention FE stuff. Here's a bit, Sanna, how about this? Because of their strong ability to take into themselves the feelings of others, counselors can be rather hurt easily by those around them, which perhaps is one reason why they tend to be private people, quietly withdrawing from human contact. And then you've got the NI superpowers that Tamara appears to have, at least some of.
Tamara gets it all.
She gets that, episodes of foreknowledge, premonitions, and that kind of stuff. I think one of the reasons why Keirsey put this in is that maybe he thought that Erickson had these superpowers.
Is this the book number 1 or 2? Or, I mean, because there's a new one?
This is Please Understand Me Too. This is 1998.
Is that the newer one?
Yes.
We went through, because one of them had some really super weird stuff.
Yeah, this is the super one. This might be the super weird, and then he toned it down in Personology.
The other, okay, oh, that was the other one. Okay, that one is better. I think you should be using that book for all this stuff, to be honest. But anyway, I wanted to point out that the, can you go up back to the taking emotions of other people into yourself?
Yep.
Yeah, the problem with that is that when it happens, it's not necessarily easy to tell whether it's your feeling or somebody else's feeling. So you start feeling something and you assume that it's yours, and you only later realize that it wasn't your own feeling at all. So it can be very draining.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice to be able to start telling the difference, because they feel exactly the same. You don't like you can't tell automatically whether this is your own stuff or somebody else's stuff that you're just kind of absorbing.
Yeah, it gets tricky because especially I believe that when the INFJ, when the IEI resembler is actually in the mode of counseling somebody, FI is going to be involved there. So it's going to get tricky as to, it's not clear lines in terms of the cognitive processes.
Actually, the counseling mode, the directive mode, is kind of protection against this particular thing. Right. Because you're not really emotionally it's more like an observation mode rather than feeling emotions mode. It's a kind of a boundary, so that you're more, at least for me, I'm less likely to get emotionally into it if I'm in that mode.
Right. I actually used this bit in the bit where we did the INFJ, sorry, the IEI Socionics whiteboard. I actually quoted some of this where Sanna could object to that bit. And again, there's not that much here again about ethics. It was only that one bit there. That's that. Again, nothing on ethics. This is just to show people the only bit on the ethics part in the counselor profile is this bit here. So it can easily understand and deal with complex ethical issues. And yet with this INFP profile, all that green's lots of ethical stuff in there. So
I have just one question for Sanna again, if I can make. About what you said, that sometimes it's hard between distinguishing if some emotions is your or not. For me, I always know if it's my emotion or someone else, and I can act with emotional atmosphere of someone else, but I know that I'm aware these not my emotions or my created atmosphere, but I can go into it, but I know the whole time it's not authentic to what I feel. Do you also have these authenticity questions in your mind the whole time, or not when you are in the counseling mode?
Well, first of all, please teach me how to do that. I was 30 before it even occurred to me that a lot of the negative things that I've been feeling were not my own things. I mean, it took me a long time to even become aware of the concept that this could be happening, and it wasn't a lot of fun. So yes, I'm concerned about being authentic. I think it's an NF thing in general. It's just that for me, being authentic is probably a little bit different than it is for you, because I do being able to somehow express how I feel or what I think is, for me, it's about being honest, and that to me is a part of being authentic. If I have to bottle up how I feel, it's very uncomfortable because I feel that I can't be myself. But I do care about the concept very much.
And if you feel you can't be authentic with those people, are you go away if it's possible to find someone else to be authentic with? Or
yeah. If I can't be myself with somebody, I'm not going to get close to them or try to get close to them. I'm just going to focus on somebody that I can be myself with.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, go on, Monika.
Well, I just remember that all the time I had a feeling in the group of people, and as I mentioned, I'm not very good with groups. I always needed someone to make a rapport with, to one individual who I could make this connection to, because the group, it was very confusing, like so many people. I needed to have the one, and I felt that I could be authentic with one people, but with the whole group, it's not very possible.
For me, it depends on there's an individual connection or relationship with everybody in that group. So if they're all my friends, then I'm gonna be okay with the group. If there are people I don't know, then I'm gonna be less interested, I suppose. It depends. I mean, there could be like a shared interest, like, socionics, for example, which will make me engage because I'm interested in the topic. But yeah, I'm very one-on-one. I'm social last and Enneagram, so I'm not terribly concerned with groups in general.
Yeah, I was told to be social first, but antisocial. So I guess it's also sort of different than. Yeah, Ben.
I'll just say just a slight interjection. So Catherine came up with this interesting idea called negative identifications with the instinct. So someone could be negatively identified with the social instinct. So they could be an antisocial social instinct.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that's me. Hi.
Because that's listed in one of the hangouts. So, for example, you can have a lot of, and me and Jeff might have had this at certain points, where you get negatively identified with the sexual instinct, where you're not up to the self-image of where you want to be, and so you can become negatively identified with your own self-image. There we go. Oh, the microphone has gone off. So I'll just have a look through this, see if there's anything that's worth commenting on before if we move on to the next one. Okay, let's challenge that bit. So I think generally that the EII and the Keirsey INFP are easygoing. Generally.
You think so?
Yeah, unless they're in the presence of something unless they're in the presence of too much power sensing, too much extroverted sensor, then I think that they are easygoing, because not every conversation is going to go on to something that's ethical that's going to annoy them.
Well, this is probably something what happened with those MBTI profiles. I think that descriptions of INFJs and INFPs are very messed up into one another because in one you can read how INFPs are easygoing, friendly, and the second one will tell you how those INFPs are reserved and just unfriendly and aloof. I think it just
Yeah.
messed up very much because everyone just interpreted it in its own way.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of misinterpretation, I guess.
I think what's happened is like what these profiles need to get with the program and do what Enneagram does, and that's show healthy, average, and unhealthy versions.
Yeah, and I read that actually those kind INFPs are in fact mistyped ISFJs. So it seems like they're, for some people, they just won't believe you to be a kind INFP. You know?
Yeah. Well, what is that though? Beneficiary shift. Because it's SIFI. It's the beneficiary shift where you can look like your beneficiary type. So, like I said, I mean, Victor's profile, the humanist, really is stimulated by suffering in other people. And what happens then? That you go in, that's where they shift to going into a mode of acting a little bit like SEI, a little bit like the Keirsey protector, but it's usually more on the level of caring for the psychological health of somebody. And that's literally the field that Hannah has gone into, with dealing with older patients who are coming towards the end of life. And she's talked about that publicly. At least I think she has. Yes.
Well, I think that some of these peoples are really ripping these thoughts a part of their context. I would say that the kindness as a whole can be like deeply held value for INFPs. It doesn't have to be anything which systems command, but really it can be a value which is very dear to you. And INFPs are all about their values, stereotypically. So it's really something what I think it's possible to have both INFP and kind. And I really don't understand why some of these IMBTI enthusiasts can't see this way as possible.
Well, MBTI, I mean, those MBTI types could be several different types in Keirsey, so that's not really pertinent as such. I mean, we would need to know, first of all, there is social type, and there is way more mixing than things. And then we would need to know their Keirsey types as well to actually say anything definite in the context of this conversation.
Yeah, and also people's Enneagram can really... So for instance, when Keirsey's writing this profile of the INFP, obviously he didn't know about Enneagram because his son didn't know about Enneagram. And so some of the bits are going to sound 9-ish. Just like that's what Thingy said. That's what Jonathan said about Victor's INFP profile. He said that the lead FI sounded very 9-ish. So when writing a profile of the INFP, some of them are going to be E4, some are going to be E9, and you've got to find the commonalities. And so some of that's going to work its way in there, and it's going to be very difficult to weave out the Enneagram from the Jungian type if you don't know about Enneagram. Somebody asked the question, and Monika, you mentioned this to me before we went on air. So when you get back, Monika, I have a question for you, because somebody asked about telling the difference between ESI and EII, and this question was from somebody called ENFP Feelings. My friend struggles to tell the difference between ESI and EII in Socionics. How would she go about doing that? How does SE polar versus NE polar differ? She can't tell what one she is.
Well, once you get to know one person of each type, it's super easy to tell. But I would say Socionics SE is very distinct. It's because it is power sensing. In Model G, it's the same kind of power sensing as SLE, so it's very in your face when it's engaged. polar in any tends to come across as distrust of alternative options that don't have concrete data backing them up. And they will be very uncomfortable in situations where when there is uncertainty. They want to be sure, which is actually a case for all NI valuing types. But when it's the polar, when NE is polar, it's going to be something that they are very bad at. So ESI generally comes across as more decisive, more kind of more black and white in a sense when it comes to their judgments, because NE, on the other hand, is always trying to see different alternative perspectives and doesn't enjoy locking into just one. So it's going to be more fluid, and they're going to have polar SC, which is in turn, they hate force. They hate having people forced to do anything. They hate having force applied to them. And they definitely don't want to use force to get anyone to do anything. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like a brief version.
Yeah. Or what you can have happen with, where it can be quite ironic in that the INFP and INTP can overreact and use more force than is required.
Yeah, under stress, you can overuse your polar, but you're never going to do it voluntarily. It's going to be a very distinct situation where they feel trapped, basically.
Yeah. Or sometimes I can think that with that seeing the consequences of things, and if they get a little bit tired like me, then they can think, well, I've got to head this off at the pass. I've got to stop this from developing into a problem. Because it's like they think how it can develop. And so then if they can get into that thought process of got to be preemptive here. So that's drastic situations. Okay, so yes, I am polar SE, Walter Wiseman. So ENFP feelings was happy with your answer, Sanna.
Okay.
So going back to this profile, is there anything there? So do you believe you have a capacity for caring not found in the other types? Monika?
Well, definitely not caring in like truly physical sense. I can't cook very well. I'm really not your typical housewife, I guess. Although I'm trying to be helpful in this mental, psychological area, I'm trying to be someone who really listens to you and who will take you for who you are. And I really don't like to pressure anyone to change themselves. Because I don't want this either. I also don't want to be changed. I just want people to see me for who I am, and I want to offer that also to other people. So I guess it really depends on definitions of this caring. Although I can prepare you tea. I can do that.
I think there's a particular Keirsey dichotomy called directive and informing that works very well for distinguishing quasi-identical intuitive introverts. So, for example, INTP and INFP being SE break. So it's like they're not going to be directive and they're not going to like people directing them. Whereas you've got INFJ and INTJ who are directive. So it matches up quite nicely with the functions. So that dichotomy of directive versus informing seems to be something that stands up quite well when looking at the differences between LII and IEI. Sorry, LII, yeah, ILI. I hate this right code.
Well, I'm always very careful to say that whatever I say is my opinion and that I think that you could do. I would never say something like, you should do this.
Right.
I always present it as my opinion,
Right.
and that it's the person's possibility to act on this, but it's really up to them.
So I think for a functional explanation for why INFP, Keirsey INFP might be informing is that with the NE, you see in various options. So it's not like you're super committed to one option that you see as this is the right option. And so if you see many options, well, you could do this, you could do that. However, if it's a strong ethical thing, then maybe INFP can like come out of their shell. If it's something they care about a lot, then again, that's that thing with like, and maybe if they feel pressured by it, that's where that thing where they can overreact with the break SE, and you sometimes see an INFP when they're really upset, and it comes out and there's a lot of emotional force behind it, and they seem a little bit rattled because they're very upset, and so you've got a combination there between their ethics and they're not liking the pressure with the break SE.
Yeah, I definitely have my opinions, and some are very strong, and I will feel very sad or devastated if some people are against them, but I will process it by myself as the most possible direction. I try really not to force anyone to anything.
Right. So this is
my approach is definitely different.
That's the thing. So it's like, so the idea in Keirsey is that the INFJ is predisposed to being more directive, and the INFP is predisposed to being informing. And so it's easier for the INFJ to do the counseling role, and it's easier for the INFP to do more of the mediating kind of role. But those roles are all sort of NF-ish, diplomatic enabling, so they can do various roles within that. It's just that there's one that's closer to their natural predisposition. So Sanna is naturally predisposed to being a little bit more directive than Monika.
I don't really have, I mean, it seems to work on MPs as well. So I don't think I do it in a manner that they have an adverse reaction to it.
I think that's because you get immersed into the context. You know what's required in that context.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the weird things about, so here's the weird thing. SFPs are informing rather than directive. So you think, hey, wait a minute, they've got extroverted sensing. Why aren't they directive? Well, FI is about rapport, and rapport is about being on the same level. So that can sort of explain functionally why the SFPs are directive. And maybe people can think about this themselves when thinking about ESFPs versus ESTPs. You can see how ESTPs are directive. Do you think that ESFPs and ISFPs are directive, or do they only get like that when they are resisting being controlled?
I don't really know any ESIs well enough to be able to tell. I'm still waiting to actually talk to one properly.
Well, you can talk to Shannon because she very much identifies with the ESI profile, and she's a mind bender as far as I'm concerned in being like the Keirsey ISFP, but also like the ESI, which I see as significantly different from the Keirsey ISFP. But she's counterphobic 6, so it's like it's tricky.
I think a lot of ESIs are 6s.
Yeah, it sounds very 6, the profile. Yeah, with the not wanting to take risks. So Monika will be coming back, and we've got the anything, serene, having a capacity for caring, healers, care deeply, passionately about a few special persons. Yeah, a favorite cause, and yeah, a few special persons. So they've got the connection aspect there. Further has been peaceful. Yeah, we've pretty much gone through that. So while Monica is introverted, I'll go through this summary of all NFs. Or do you want to read through it, Monica, and stop at a certain point? What is your preference? I'll tell you what, I could read through it, and if you put your hand up, I'll shut up, and then you can comment on it. We could go with that method. As a variant of Plato's idealists and Aristotle's ethicists, the INFPs are little different from other NFs in most respects. Like all the idealists, they are abstract in communicating and cooperative in implementing goals. So, for example, in one of the Dario profiles, he had an ESFJ say this: sharing confidences is a gift. Now, to me, ESFJ doesn't talk like that. That sounds more NF. That sounds more like abstract communication. I believe ESFJ would say something like this: I like being open with people, and I love it when they're open with me. So it's something that's not as abstract, because sharing confidences is a little bit more of an abstract noun. Confidences. But then I also had this discussion yesterday where, but if the ESFJ grew up in an environment where everybody talks like that and talked in sort of self-improvement babble, then they would talk like that. So abstracting, communicating and cooperative in implementing goals. They want to learn about the humanities, are preoccupied with morale, and work well with personnel. In orientation, they are altruistic, credulous. Yes, they are credulous sometimes, especially the NFPs, especially the younger ones. Credulous, mystical, situated on pathways. I'm not quite sure what that means because I've not read that section. Right, Monica. Okay. Yes, you are unique. Right, what we got? Altruistic, credulous. Because they're credulous because they want to believe in things. And so if there's something, if someone presents you with something that you really want to believe in, it's less of a hurdle to believe in it. It's just like the opposite, where when there's something really large and looming, people don't want to believe in it because they don't want to recognize it. It's like the elephant in the room that people don't want to recognize. So it's like, oh, I don't want to recognize that this huge national debt is going to cause a problem. It's too much to think about. It's too abstract. It's don't want to think about it. Don't want to go there. Whereas for the INFP, when it's something that they really want to believe in, because it's so nice and it fits with their values, they are going to give that viewpoint credit, even if it seems a little bit idealistic. It's because they believe in it because they want to believe in it. And so when it says there about being credulous, if people think with their experiences, the types of things that they are credulous about are going to be things around people's character and ethics and the good in people. Now, NTs can be credulous when it comes to, whoa, this Bitcoin is going to be the future. And we're going to get away from the dollar and all this kind of stuff. So NTs can get credulous with technology and have their imaginations run away with them with the promise of technology. So people can be credulous in different ways. Mystical, situated on pathways, with their eye on tomorrow. Yeah. They base their self-image on being empathic, benevolent, and authentic. Right, so when he talked about guardians, Keirsey wrote beneficent. And so I thought, hang on a minute, that sounds a little bit benevolent, but it's a little bit different. So I checked it out. Beneficent is more being the actively kind thing. So more the kind of stuff that SFJs do. Whereas benevolence is sort of a general positive outlook towards humanity. It's more abstract and it's less practical than beneficence. Often enthusiastic, they trust intuition, yearn for romance, seek identity, prize recognition, and aspire to the wisdom of the sage. Intellectually, they are prone to practice diplomacy far more than strategy, logistics, and especially tactics. Tactics is associated with SPs and comes in two varieties: improvising and expediting. And so an example of an expediter, go on, Monica.
Okay, so I will take it from the beginning. Okay, so I think that with being abstract in communication, it really helped me my study of philosophy, because I felt that finally I could afford to be abstract in my communicating and not being told to be weird or just different from anyone else. Because I think that, I studied in my, well, what's the term for it? Not elementary school, but after, at my high school, I studied commerce, and it was a huge mistake, and everything was somehow concrete, and I really didn't feel I fitted in. And I think that philosophy and people who were there, I really could feel at home with these abstraction at all. So it was really helpful.
I think this is very telling. So if you tell the audience what aspects of philosophy you were particularly interested in, I think that's personally telling.
You want me to say that?
Yeah, but I do think it's important because NTP is, because people are drawn to philosophy for different aspects. I just think that those particular aspects of philosophy that you find interesting are telling.
Okay, I always thought that my biggest hobby was to think about things and to contemplate, which wasn't very practical, but I thought that in philosophy it really could be the way, and also I didn't fit in. And people in philosophy, they were very different and very alternative from almost anyone who I met. And it was a place to where it wasn't weird to come up with all those ideas and theories. It was valued in there, and it was appreciated. And it also gave me the possibility to understand more to myself, especially existentialism. It was my favorite thoughts, because I really could relate to absurdity of the world, because it was something what I was living in the whole life. I think our life was very much absurd for me.
What get me if I don't know, I might be wrong about this, but
Yeah.
were the absurd aspects of life, did they tend to focus on the negative aspects of life? Maybe seeing evil as absurd. I can't quite remember the sort of viewpoint of existentialism.
It was absurd, like everything in the world, and that the world itself or the life itself, it's really absurd. And I felt it because I saw like a lot of injustice, and I think this is something what is also written in this part about INFP's healer. Like they are very into morality and into social justice. I think I thought it was just absurd how what values humanity had, and what was interesting in my peer groups, and those shared values across. Does it make sense?
that bit there, especially the shared values thing. This is where it gets a little bit weird because always the thing that I will come up with, and that people will think about is INFPs are very individualistic with that FI. However, you said there you want people with the shared values. So there is this group mindset with the INFPs.
Yeah, it was something like, how is even possible for those people to be interested in those things? I mean, I think it was just very shallow and somehow bad. And hey, Ben, it's a little bit personal.
Okay, I don't want you to say anything that will make this video get taken down.
Okay. But the point was that finally at philosophy and there's ground for something more abstract and intellectual, I finally felt accepted for the first time.
Right. So basically, so folks, Monika has been deciding between INFP and INTP, and I just think the things that she's interested in philosophy tend to be more NF-ish, whereas INTP, the way I see INTP, they're gonna love epistemology. The INTPs are gonna love epistemology. How do we know it? What is the nature of knowing? What is knowing? What? Let's think about thinking and all those kinds of things. And of course, you're going to be interested in that as well, but your focus of attention.
You know, but it's also my favorite question. What is objective, or what are just my subjective beliefs? I mean, is there even possible something as objective knowing?
Yeah. So that's a combo there. So you did the epistemology thing, but then you went to beliefs. So it's like this is where, as far as I'm concerned, as soon as somebody starts thinking about their feelings, they're going into TI. Because I take Jung's definition of introverted feeling literally, he literally means the feeling. And then when you start thinking about it, especially, and this is going to be one of the differences between maybe ISFP and INFP, you've got an abstract type. So you're going to think about it, and they're going to think about it a lot. And you've got the overall mindset is an introverted judger, I, little j, leading with an introverted rational function. And so they are going to think about things. And so feeling and thinking is going to come in there. It's like, and I think I once wrote as a note to myself that it might be an extreme view of INFP, but there is a tendency, certainly with things that they feel strongly about, where their thoughts are filtered through their feelings. And so, and that's what you can get with people's political bias. Their thoughts.
Well, I have something in this final sentence, maybe some little points for TI or for INTP.
Go on then.
That intellectually they are prone to practice diplomacy far more than strategy. And I would say that being diplomatic is somehow a part of my strategy, because I would say that my people skills are not very strong, or yeah, they are better, but I think that being diplomatic is the best way for acting. So it's a part of strategy.
Yeah, I mean, Keirsey breaks it down where he's got the expressive diplomatic roles. So you've got teacher and advocate. So teacher for ENFJ, advocate, the main SJW for the advocate for ENFP. And then you've got the reserved social roles of counselor and healer. So I believe that maybe the social role that best fits the talents of INFP, although he also says that there's 3 types that get to be the best writers: ISFP, INFP, and INFJ, according to Keirsey. At least he gives the sensing type some love. What was I saying before that? Oh yes, reserved roles. So So the healer reconciling alienate. So maybe a family therapist, where they might say, well, if you look at it like this and try to get down. And it was Virginia Satir that used the meta model, but she used it with great skill in trying to get at the communication of where people were coming from in their communication. So they really understood each other and left it up to them to understand each other, rather than saying, well, about this, and this. Now, apparently, Virginia Satir thought that Milton Erickson was evil because he was using these stories to get at people's unconscious, to direct them in certain ways. And Erickson being a prime example of INFJ, a super INFJ. And go on, Monika.
Well, sometimes it seems that when I speaking with both sides of some conflict, sometimes it can seem like I'm the fan of the other side and that I'm trying to encourage the evil side, but I'm only trying to all sides to look at all those possible angles and to try to empathize more with some possible different alternative story or some possible alternative. But then I seem as a villain because I'm trying to encourage the other side, which is not present there.
So that's an example there of Keirsey saying that INFP is predisposed to doing that, and that's coming through in your interaction. It's just that, I mean, as he wrote here with INFP, about a few special persons. That's the thing, because for INFP, it's about that personal connection. And yeah, one-to-one, they can be good. But again, they are reserved, they are introverted, they have this subjective, any IN type, any introverted intuitive, or intuitive introvert rather. I don't want people getting confused with NI ego types. Or rather, sorry, not NI ego types, NI DOMs. Intuitive introverts. Right, so in terms of philosophy, I have something for people, and I have something for you, Monika. There is a podcast out there called The Partially Examined Life, and it starts by saying, we are 3 people that did philosophy in the 1990s, and we wish we didn't, because it wasn't a very practical subject. And so they talk about philosophy. So that's a podcast out there. It's also known as PEL, The Partially Examined Life. And apparently, what I've recently been told by an INFP resembler is that apparently their Facebook group is a very good Facebook group rather, with no trolling, and it's very nice and disciplined, and the INFPs will have a nice time in there. So, is there anything else within that purple sausage, Monika, that is worth commenting on?
Well, oh no, it's behind the purple.
Above the purple sausage. Okay, I will move.
No. It's down the purple. It's about the champion part, healer of conflict and people's champion.
Oh, right. Okay. So there we go.
That's only that I also can be a champion for people who I feel are not very well understood, and who I feel are suffering or misunderstand. And I try to offer another possible view on their situation, or to their people, probably something that other people won't think of. I just try to bring some new angle to this. So in this regard, I can also be a champion.
Yeah, but again, it's the mediating thing, and mutual understanding different viewpoints. Yeah. That's the diplomatic insight, not so much they are this person that can fantastic people skills that can talk to anybody. It generally means he's breaking it down into mediating and mentoring. So the NFJs are the mentors, either on the expressive level of the teacher, educator, or on the more reserved level of the healer, meaning the reconciler of differences. And then the so mediators and mentors. It's just the differences in, and of course it's not the case that they have to be those things. It's just there's a difference between the type and the role enactments. These are just predisposed roles. When talking about the type, Monika's best fit type would be, in my opinion, diplomatic, because that's the intellect, accommodator, which is the interaction style. So in Behrens, that would be the catalyst temperament, and the interaction style would be behind the scenes. Whereas your husband, INTJ, he would be strategic, and because NTJ, that goes towards the coordinating rather than constructing, coordinating towards long-term objectives, when the interaction style is like Sanna's, contending. So reserved and directive. But it's
But you know, he also was thinking that INTP is possible for me because we were at this meeting with Calgary guys, enthusiasts of MBTI, and they had some pretty good arguments for NT.
Well, my argument would be that you studied philosophy and you trained up your TI. There's a heck of a lot of TI in philosophy.
Or I just had a good TI at first, but no one just understood that. So I had to go to philosophy to feel understood and to feel free to continue with TI, right?
Another thing is, because you identify with Enneagram Type 4.
Yeah.
That's one of the things, which is a feeling Enneagram.
With a strong 5 wing.
Yeah, I believe in your strong 5 wing.
from both 4 and 6. There is something like double strong 5 wing, you know.
Yeah, and also, is your tri-type 469?
Yeah.
Same as Sanna's.
Yep.
So.
And Sanna is leading with 4.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, I most people agree on that.
That's a little in joke there. Right then. Awkward moment that we will not elaborate upon. So the idea is that you can force yourself into these more expressive roles.
I'm used to a lot of awkward moments. It happened to me very often. And this is also the reason why I was doubting my feeling part, because NTs are told. NTs are known for their awkward moments, stereotypically.
I mean, when you're talking about your people skills, I think if everybody else was an NF, you would think your people skills were fantastic. It's just getting the connection with people on these things. Because you can't really go, oh, let's talk about something deep and meaningful. Who are you? Go away. So, and it's also difficult in order to get to that point where you know the person well enough, where you can then transition to the sort of conversation that you want to talk about. Whereas for the SFs, especially SFJ, they're better at talking about more the surface stuff at first. And then they can get, and then they would talk about psychology at a deeper level, but it's going to be more of that thing of what Aristotle wrote, think as wise men do, but speak as common men do, kind of thing, where the language is still going to be concrete, but they can still talk at sophisticated level about somebody's feelings. So, for example, I knew an ESFJ that was studying psychology, and Iana, ESFJ resembler, I think she has a PhD, I think it's in psychology, and Elena, ESFJ, has a degree in psychology. But her preference would come through in terms of when she talks about socionics and somebody questions a fundamental of it, she would say, yes, but that's the theory. Whereas INTP would actually debate the fundamentals. Right, so here we go. This is where it gets very...
Dan?
Yes?
Do you want to answer the questions? that are being piled up?
Oh, there's more being piled up, is there? Let's
Yeah,
see.
there was one quite some time ago about advice during a problem-solving situation, but I don't know who that was.
It might be for you.
Directed at.
I think that's better for you. You're on a roll here, Sanna, in this hangout. I think it might be best for you to answer these NF-related questions. I only know it in the abstract.
Okay. The question is, how many advices does she give in a problem-solving situation? Does she move and want to change the circumstances, or does she have several ideas of how to do that? I think that's a distinct difference, because I figure out where the person is, where the person wants to be, or where the person should be, according to what they say and how they feel to me. And then I pretty much, I kind of sense the necessary path they have to take there, and I nudge them, I push them, I find ways to get them to see what they need to do to get there. So I don't really focus on multiple different it's going to be, all my advice is going to be focused on how to get to that specific point that they need to get to. I assume that it's going to be somewhat different for an EII. So maybe you can explain that.
Yeah. And thanks for that, Sanna. That was a very good example of how INFJ has a predisposition towards being directive. Over to Monika.
Yeah. So I don't know if Monika wants to give her point of view as well, because it's probably going to be interestingly different.
Well, yeah, of course. I just find the question.
It was a while ago. Like,
oh, yeah.
about.
Yeah, I see that. Advice. Well, I'm trying not to give direct advices. I mostly see my interpretation of the thing and of all parts. For example, how the second part can probably see it, how the third part can probably see it. I'm trying to see these different views of each side, and I'm trying to. Well, I definitely don't try to say you should do this or you should do that, but mostly what possibilities there are for each of these parts, and what every single solution could lead to, again, to those possibilities. So I guess I'm not focused into a single option.
What do you do if the person has a goal that they want to get to? A singular goal.
Yeah, well, I try to discuss the more possibilities how to get to this goal.
Can you see the most likely path they should take?
Well, I think I can, but I also would say there are different ways how to get to the goal. Even the one is more possible.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that others are not so probable.
Yeah, I think I kind of do it the other way around. I will try to alternatives if the person isn't open to the first one, but I will kind of focus on the most likely first, or the most the best option. There are some other questions as well. You can read them. That one just that was just there for quite some time, so I thought I would point it out.
Yeah, I love all this stuff about the differences, and it shows that I think David Mark Keirsey, the son of the psychologist, said that his father got this idea of this dichotomy, directive informing, from Jay Haley. I think he said it was from Jay Haley. So it was a thing that's sort of in other interaction style things, but it does seem to be a really good dichotomy and things that you can see in how people act. So sort of various, and it seems to be right there. You're seeing it there in that discussion. This directive versus informing thing, and also thinking about how the functions can sort of line up with that is interesting. So Keirsey didn't do functions, but he did other things, and those other things were interesting. So my thing with Keirsey is, does he give you a different viewpoint that's useful? I believe that other viewpoint he gives is useful, and it doesn't matter that it didn't use functions. I just want something that's useful in it. There's no point having another system that's exactly the same as Socionics that doesn't give me any extra information or extra view. All it would do is sort of support Socionics more by saying, oh, this separate system reached very similar conclusions. So that's
there. Sorry.
That's okay.
There is a follow-up question, the one we just answered. Should we cover that now before we go on to something else?
Yeah.
So what's the best option in INFJ's view, the most effective or efficient? It's very hard to define because it's just this knowing of this is what they need to do. This is their issue. This is what's blocking them. This is what they need to tackle. And it's a very, I mean, it's, I don't really focus on words like effective or efficient. I focus on this is what they need to do. If they don't do this, they're not going to be able to get back past this hurdle that they're currently struggling with. So that's my approach to it.
So usually when you know something and you don't know why you know something, that's NI.
Probably.
It's usually related to NI.
Yeah,
and it's very annoying to INTPs when you're trying to work out, yes, but what it is. Why do you know?
It's just like you have this overall view of the person and their psyche and their issues, and you just kind of see how they fit together and where they need to do something.
So Carl Jung would say when writing about introverted intuition that you get the end point, so it comes into consciousness and it says, right, I know what the solution is. And the reason why you don't know why you know is that all of that has happened on an unconscious level. Carl Jung says that sometimes you can analyze it and work it out backwards, but the chain of associations, it's almost like an unconscious reasoning that leads to that point of, I just know. So you can see the unconscious, the huge unconscious aspect of NI. And that is why I see it as sort of like the most different from FE, which is so expressive. Whereas this NI, it's like even the NI user doesn't know. So that's what I mean about just being, they appear to be so far apart, FE and then think about poor INTJ with FE break, how hard it is for them to communicate their NI.
I think that's kind of why we're directive, because if you can't explain why this is right, you just kind of have to push them. But like you need to get them to deal with some kind of application of force. Otherwise, I mean, you can't reason it necessarily. Sometimes you can. Definitely when it comes to people's psychological issues, a lot of the time you do know, you can verbalize it, you can help them see it, but it depends. And I think both of us see the hurdle, both of us know the direction we need to go, but I'm more focused on what I think is the best option, and she's more focused on letting the person decide how they want to approach the issue.
Yeah, that's great. There we go. So Keirsey was onto something with the differences.
Yeah, but I think there is one question for me, so
go
probably I could try to answer. I will read it. Monika, as an INFP, do you focus more on what you can perceive about a person versus what they show you about themselves? Well, I think that all the time I'm trying, I think that everything is more complicated than what we are seeing. I just trying to see behind what is present. So definitely I'm trying to, if they show something to me, I'm interested in why they are showing this part to me, what can be the causes. And I think this is connected to the second part of the question. So you can look at someone who seems shallow narcissistic and see more to them than what exists. For instance, you see a sweeter side, kinder side to them. Well, I would think that probably I try to see, or not even necessarily trying, I just see the more the more nice and kind side. And some people think that I'm too trusting or too naive. So I have faith in humanity in this. But definitely I'm trying to think about various possibilities, how these people can act this way, what caused this, what are their reasons. So I am trying to really think of all these possibilities which are leading to the result this person is behaving this way. So I think I can have apologized for the person even if there are not these.
Right. So
if you understand what I'm trying to say.
So you can see from a functional bucket point of view, you can see with Sanna's approach, you can really see the NI. Well, I know the answer and I can't really explain it. And then the push with extroverted sensor. And then with Monika, you've got the options, seeing the various options with the NE, and also being SE break, not wanting to get pushy. So it lines up quite nicely with the functions as well. I've made that point before, but I thought I'd reiterate it.
Then what is this CI break?
What break?
CI break.
Oh, sorry, I said SE break.
Oh, SE break.
Yeah, sorry.
CIA break.
Yeah, it's that thing. Is probably in the Slavic language. That's that EI thing, and it's like.
Yeah.
I think Maria once said it's silly anyway because that's a diphthong. You shouldn't even have the I sound.
So, cut your any. Do you want to continue with the questions?
Yes, they are very good, and they highlight differences between INFP and INFJ.
I don't know if I'm missing some of them, but the next one I see is Monika, as an INFP, do you focus more on what you could perceive about a person versus what they show you about themselves? This can be a trap, though, because you can perceive emotions and feelings which are not there. Do you find yourself doing that at all?
Well, I can sense these emotions, but I also know that if you had some emotions inside, it doesn't mean that you are showing that outside, and vice versa. So again, there can be a lot of options why the result is what it is and why it seems one way, but it can be absolutely different in reality.
I think that this kind of at least a generic NF thing. I think we all do this, and we kind of, it can be a trap because if you're subjective and you're kind of assuming things. You can totally be wrong, but as you get older and learn to use this better, I think your accuracy also goes up, and you're not going to be seeing things that are not there as often anymore.
Yeah, it's like the fair witness position that Annie Linden talks about.
Yeah, and it has a continuation. So you can look at someone who seems shallow and narcissistic and see more to them than what exists. For instance, you can see a sweeter side, kinder side to them. Yeah, I usually say that people have a core, and that core doesn't have any of their issues. And then there could be anything in between. So a person may not actually, in their daily life, they may not behave in a manner that fits their core at all. And those are some of the issues that if somebody asks me for help, I will focus on, because my goal is always to help them get to their core self, so that they're the most authentic to themselves as they possibly can be. So, but some people, like narcissists, for example, can be very difficult, because when it's an actual personality disorder, there are no easy fixes. I don't know if we currently have a treatment method for narcissists that actually allows them to heal, if they actually have the official diagnosis. I think we focus more on how they can improve their social life and so forth by behaving in a manner that doesn't cause them as many problems. But that doesn't heal them. That doesn't cure them. It's just to make their lives easier.
Yeah, especially if they have extreme FI break and it happens to be an ESTP that's a narcissist, then it's very difficult to try and come up with an FI solution.
I don't like type people that have personality disorders, at least extreme cases, because I don't think that you can necessarily see the core type that they would have without the personality disorder. Because especially narcissists, for example, can appear very manipulative, FE type of people from the outside, but how do you know that it's not just the personality disorder? Well, so I prefer not mixing the two.
Yeah, that's generally the position of people who are proper counselors. They don't like to bring in typology willy-nilly. What I'll say is that Professor Kevin Dutton wrote a book called The Good Psychopath. And what he was doing is he was looking at the positive traits of psychopath. And when I saw this thing on Channel 4 called Psychopath Night, I thought, hang on a minute, it's talking about ESTPs. Because he's talking about all of the good traits and then the negative traits. And he said that the psychopath is the person who is most likely to be the hero in an alternate reality. And so he was and Jonathan said himself that, like, a very high percentage of psychopaths are like unhealthy ESTPs. I'm not saying all ESTPs are psychopaths.
You see, that's a statement that I don't like to make, because to me those two should be kept separate. I don't want to mix typology with those, because those are serious personality disorders, and we should not mix them. I mean, we should not bring them into typology, because either way, one of them is going to be used as an excuse for the other. So just stay away. Don't do it.
Well, people can sort of judge for themselves. Where what we did is we did with Donald Trump, and Jonathan and I, we put him against the psychopathic scale, and we went through the actual diagnostics that people use to judge a psychopath. And he was on the scale, Donald Trump, but he didn't quite qualify as a psychopath, but he was on the scale. And that's something that Kevin Dutton talked about, where he talked about those people that were very good in high stress situations tended to score on the psychopathic scale, but weren't psychopaths. They just tended to be high on the scale in terms of doing well under pressure and having a low emotions. And it's a very interesting show. And so it's this idea of that it's a scale.
It is a scale. I mean, we're all on that scale. we're all on the narcissistic scale as well. It's just that when you actually get a diagnosis, you're kind of, you know, you're out there.
Yeah,
and
it's like
different.
It's like with IN types and the schizophrenic scale, and like introverts being that almost being, oh, the person's quiet, they're almost on the autistic spectrum. If someone's an extreme introvert,
I don't
so,
like those either. I just keep them separate. I don't think there's any benefit from, unless the person feels better because they learn that there is specific type and typology, fine. But I don't think it should be used for treatment and so forth.
So if people want to know about narcissism, if they go to Spartan Life Coach, he's got a lot of videos with Sam Vaknin, and I think that Sanna, you've watched some of those videos. Are they okay for you?
Yeah. Well, I mostly read his website. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I can say something about it.
Yes, Monika.
Well, sometimes I feel that really those people with personality disorders, they are like demonized a lot. And I think that it's important to remember that they didn't choose to have these conditions. But again, maybe this is idealistic view of myself, because I didn't meet anyone with these conditions, so I don't have any personal experience. But I would say that they really didn't choose to happen this way, and that probably well, I read one book about these personality disorders, and it was said that it's good for anyone who knows someone with personality disorder, that it's better for them just to leave them or to run away from them. And I just think that it's not completely ethical or right.
In terms of Enneagram, because I read about the history of the Enneagram in Risa and Hudson personality types to prepare for the hangout, the Zoom event with Catherine Farber. Originally, the Enneagram started out as, it wasn't actually meant as personality types. It was meant as 9 sort of disorders. And especially with the Chazo, and then Naranjo is, again, because he was a Gestalt therapist, he made it about disorders. And then Don Riso said that he changed them from those into 9 actual distinct personality types. And so there's still this thing in Enneagram, when all of the types get unhealthy, they resemble, not one-to-one correlation, they resemble certain aspects of certain DSM dysfunctional types.
Well, that's not surprising, really, but I don't think there's a definite correlation that we should draw.
Yeah, Jonathan's done. We've done quite a few hangouts with Jonathan on this. That it's not one-to-one.
We are getting more questions.
I agree. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, I was just saying we're getting more questions.
Hey, and welcome to Adapt and go, because they've been very good questions.
Yeah, I'm just trying to control your any. So.
That's okay.
So, Monika, did you want to?
Yeah, I only wanted to say that I agree that probably there isn't. I think it's wrong to correlate one particular personality disorder with one particular personality type, that it's more complicated than this. And I also think it shouldn't be mixed up together. But I also wanted to say that I still think that these people with mental conditions and with personality disorders, they are still humans, and they should be treated by this and not be treated as some demons who need to be destroyed.
Yeah.
No, they don't need to be destroyed. I mean, we try to help them, obviously, but you can also not deny that some of those people are very detrimental to the people in their lives. So there is a great need for people that have a difficult person in their life to be able to set up boundaries without feeling guilty about it, because you do not have to suffer if you have, for example, a narcissist in your life. You don't have to suffer from it. It's not, you're not obligated to put up with it.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that you're demonizing them.
Yes, I think there have to be effort on both sides, not just on one side. And the second side would do anything.
Yeah, and we continue to try and find treatment options, obviously. So shall we go on?
Yeah. I'll just say that if you get this book, folks, Understanding the Enneagram, there's a discussion and you can decide for yourselves their psychological categories. And it isn't one-to-one, but it says, like, what are the sort of, like, the tendencies. So, for instance, there's going to be a tendency for the 3. Some 3 is towards narcissism. And again, it's not just one particular one. It's like, these are certain things. So, for instance, the 6 and paranoia, when they become really unhealthy. Or schizoid, when the 5 is really unhealthy. Schizotype and things like that. And Jonathan will show how these categories continually get changed and get taken out. I think even schizoid was taken out. And Jonathan at one point said, I think I joked about, well, it's taken out because a lot of INTJs might get put in that category when there's nothing wrong with them. It's just they might tick some of those boxes. So they took out schizoid, I believe, out of the DSM because it wasn't pathological enough. It was just normal INT stuff. Well, in the extreme, not normal. But yeah, it's got all in there, like dependent personality disorder. So type 9 beginning at level 6. Schizoid personality disorder. That's interesting. Type 9 beginning at level 7. So that's the idea that they've got various identities that they split themselves between. You might get like dissociative identity disorder, obsessive compulsive with type 1.
I see why they would do that. I'm very skeptical. I would not rely on that information. Not only because Enneagram isn't, scientifically valid either. And when it comes to treating personality disorders, we want to use data that is actually,
also it's old
better.
as well. It's an old book, so things have moved on. The DSM has moved on. So this is just things that people can think about.
So, can we go on?
Yes, you may.
Did you say there was a question for you, Monika, that you saw that I missed?
Oh, yeah, I think I already discussed the question, but I just had an idea that this could probably be interesting hangout about personality disorders and typology, and
I think we would need a psychiatrist or a psychologist, somebody who's well versed in both personality disorders and Enneagram. Otherwise, I don't want to do it unless there's somebody who really knows their stuff.
If we have a combination of Raquel, Nick would talk about the counselling aspect and the disorders aspect, but she doesn't want to talk about Enneagram because she wants to keep them completely separate. That's Nick Helbig. And Jonathan started with the DSM. He got very much into it. Raquel would be able to talk about the disorders part, but I don't know if she knows enough about Enneagram. So those are the best options I have in terms of a hangout.
Guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
So, shall we go on?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Sorry.
So, question is: would you say that sense of knowing comes from more for INFJs who come from the gut, type 1 or 9? No, I wouldn't. I think it's anyone who's that particular type counselor. I think Enneagram will change the flavor and possibly the approach of the person slightly. A 9 is probably going to be a little less directive than I am. And I think a lot of MBTI INFJ ones are probably EII instead of IEI. So that would also be a difference. So it depends on which system you're talking about. But if we assume that they're all Keirsey INFJs, then I would say we just change the approach. It wouldn't change the actual cognitive process of how you approach the situation. So minor differences, I think. And another one, that was for me. Does anyone else have anything else to say, or?
Just anyway, I'll just slight digression, but I will get back on track. So Psychopath Night, they said that James Bond, especially the Sean Connery one, was on the psychopathic scale, and Jeff has said that is an STP. So there's the Sean Connery kind of Bond that was a little bit sexist, and also what you said about the core, trying to get to someone's core, Sanna, that matches up with Linda Berens. She has a model of the core self, and then the developed self. So sort of like you've got someone's predisposition and their nurture, and then outside of that you've got the situational self.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, so another one for me. Can you perceive a core and narcissist more difficult, or is it more difficult to shed the layers around it? Well, I don't have experience. I don't have professional experience of dealing with a narcissist in a counseling session. However, in my experience, the way I perceive a narcissist is they have this, it looks like a black hole because they require external validation for them to be able to operate in the world. So it doesn't mean that they don't have a core, but this conceptual hole that I sense in them, it kind of replaces it in a way, which is what makes it very difficult to heal, because they would need to go back to their core trauma that happened sometime in the childhood, most likely. I think the current understanding is that narcissism is the result of a very specific kind of trauma. And so it's very difficult because it is so deep that it affects their entire personality construct instead of just being like, affecting a part of it. So that's why we don't really have workable, complete healing techniques at this point. But I do believe that hopefully eventually we will.
One of the things that Erickson would do is when he had a client that didn't want to say what the actual problem was, that he would sort of pick up and give them a sort of story that sort of allegorized it, that's trying to get at the thing that was a strategy that was effective in the past, the solution that was effective in the past to deal with the issue, but now that solution has become the problem, and that solution is, and the awareness of that has become unconscious, and they're still following that. And that's something Tom Condon has said.
Yeah, I think that's very much a thing for narcissism, because it is a coping mechanism for a trauma that was so great that they had to develop this. Well, I've seen that guy you mentioned earlier. He
Kevin Dussin.
I forget the name. Yeah, him. Yeah. So he goes into quite a bit of detail if people want to go read his website or listen to his videos, because he's apparently a narcissist himself, and he's also very political. So he explains it in very, it seems like a very non-emotional manner, and I found them quite useful. Anyway, my point was something. What did you say? What did you say last?
I'll just say that Sam Vaknin used to do videos about Obama being a narcissist, which I personally think he is on that scale, but you know, that again, that's political. And then one of the phrases
we're all
he
on that
used,
scale, so that doesn't really say much.
Yeah.
It's a matter of whether you have a diagnosis or not, really. Otherwise,
he comes up with a great phrase: pronoun density. I love that.
Anyway, yeah, it is. I think that the coping mechanism for the trauma becomes it starts so early, becomes so deeply ingrained that it is the basis for the entire personality.
Right.
And that makes it so difficult.
You see, Keirsey Sr. was working on a book about his theory of madness, and bits of it, the son has said, that's David Mark Keirsey, the computer scientist, and person who's trying to reconcile general relativity and quantum mechanics. So if he does it, he'll be the king of INTPs. So on the Keirsey blog, on one of the Keirsey blogs on the internet, he's releasing sections from this unfinished book. It's about 1,000 pages and is not organized, about David Keirsey's theory of the dark escape. And it's very similar to people having this coping mechanism, and that coping mechanism has made them appear mad, and the madness is the dark escape. It's a similar thought process there from Keirsey Sr., who was a educational psychologist, and he actually lectured in diagnosing dysfunctional behavior.
Well, fortunately, not all coping mechanisms are as deep. Most of them we can heal, at least to a very great extent. So
and that was,
we all have coping mechanisms, so they're not in itself, they're not serious. They're not necessarily that serious.
I think Keirsey Sr. went too far in. He was like totally against drugs. Medicated, because what had happened in the 60s was, with unruly children, they put them on tranquilizers far too much. So as an overreaction, he was completely against medication. And now, of course, people will say, well, that's a little bit too far there. And he was
balance is needed.
So if you want to answer some more questions.
I don't see anything else. Wait, there's one from ADD, ADHD. Is it not possible for certain personality disorders to just be a representation for another variation in typology? For instance, ADHD and ADD. Well, that's something any type can have, ADHD and ADD, one of them. However, I do think that there is also a possibility of mistaking one for the other in some sense. But, I mean, it's not considered a disorder if it doesn't hinder the person's life in a negative manner. So have to be very, very careful there. But I would not say that, ADHD is just a representation of NE or SE. I think that's a gross oversimplification. It's going to be a very individual thing, and it's going to be up to the person's doctor to figure out what it is.
I think that something similar is happening also with autism spectrum and with Asperger's syndrome. It's also correlated with SI or with TI, just thinking thing or a lack of feeling.
I'll just say that Victor types, when we did the NE hangout, he thinks, he gives a little bit, Victor thinks that accentuated NI is autism. I will differ from that point of view. He thinks that accentuated NE leads to ADHD. I've looked at some of the ADHD things in terms of the hormones, and there's some conflicting evidence with the hormones. And I would think, well, you don't know the difference between SE ADHD and NE ADHD. And you've got people with accentuated NE that have been misdiagnosed, as it's sort of like they've run it together. It's two different things. People can be ADHD in an NE way, and people can be ADHD in an SE way. And the SE way, in my opinion, is that they just have a very high threshold for stimulation.
Also, you can also have I mean, there are 3 types of ADHD, and they're all
Yeah.
ADD is not actually an official term anymore,
Yeah.
but there's 3 subcategories of ADHD. There's the inattentive one,
Yep.
and then there's the one that I forget the name of, but basically it's just
Is it one of these?
yeah, there's hyperactive, and then there's predominantly inattentive, and then there's a mixture of those two. And
Well,
I personally, I have a mild diagnosis for the inattentive version of ADHD. I've never been treated for it because it is mild.
right.
And I'm not an any user, any valuing person, and I'm not SE ego either. So I'm one of those people that definitely doesn't fit with this theory.
So
You
the
know,
ones that,
you have to look at the whole thing.
So the ones highlighted in faint yellow are the ones which fit me. And then I had these very much before age 7, like climbing over things and relative moving ornaments, these problems. And then diet. Diet is has a big fact on this, like too much sugar in the diet. But yeah, so I once said yesterday to Jeff, like, does it say at the back, hey, if you have read every page in this book for cover to cover, perhaps your ADHD is not that strong.
Do you have also Asperger's for dummies?
Okay, before you any out of this, I have to say I don't know about the diet parts. I have not read about that. However, ADHD is not, despite the name, it's not really about attention deficit. It's more about the inability to focus.
Yes.
When you don't have a specific interest in that subject, because another part of ADHD is hyperfocus.
Yes.
Which is the exact opposite. So it's more about regulating focus, being unable to regulate it properly when it's uninteresting, than it is about lacking focus at all. So if you're going to read a book and you're really into it, you might be hyper focusing it, and that's part of ADHD.
That's why it's such an effort for me to read. Yet when I do read, I make these detailed notes.
Right. Hyper focus is actually awesome, as long as you don't stay in there for 2 days in a row.
And I won't, because it's too much
effort. Extremely useful. I definitely take advantage of it whenever it happens.
To me, it's like lifting a weight. It's like lifting a weight and holding it up.
Yeah, and it's like effortless learning because you're so totally into it.
I mean,
this is something what also people on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum, have, this super focus.
Yes.
And these two conditions are also often appearing together.
Yes.
ADHD and autistic spectrum.
Yeah, I think they call it comorbidity or something.
Yeah, comorbidity. Yes.
So I'll just say, when they were looking at the hormonal aspect, because I was looking at some literature that sort of looked at the hormonal correlates of the Keirsey temperaments, and really this goes all the way back to Kretschmer, because Kretschmer was writing about, this was a guy in Germany in the 1920s. He actually knew Carl Jung. He was writing about, and he was saying that there is a hormonal relationship to the Keirsey temperaments. He knew the temperaments in their dysfunctional aspects. And he saw that there was a hormonal relationship because he looked at family trees and he looked at people with certain disorders with overactive glands which produce the hormones. And so he would use sometimes phrases like secretions of the blood. And he was very careful INTP. And Keirsey Jr. agrees that Kretschmer was INTP. And his final paragraph is about that long. And he wants to join everything together and use his theory to bring all fields of knowledge together. Anyway, so bottom line, he says something like, we don't know how much is the brain apparatus and how much is the effect of secretions of the blood on that apparatus. But anyway, there's hormones involved with ADHD, and there's some conflicting things, and it appears to be that mixture of the sensory kind of ADHD and the NE kind of ADHD, where for the what Dario has said about about SE DOMs is once it reaches a certain threshold, they can concentrate better than anybody else, and they are totally in the moment. And what you'll see with the behavior of those types is when they're not focused, they hate being bored. They said about JFK has been typed as ESTP by Keirsey. And he said one of the things that was said about Jack Kennedy is the worst thing you can do with him is have him be bored. Do not bore him. And so there is that level of threshold where they can focus the best. But then also Sanna did say that a feature of ADHD is hyperfocus. It's just that when you look at the literature, there is some contradictory things with the hormones. And that makes me think, that's the NE part and that's the SE part.
Well, somebody who's a psychiatrist or something should do research on that.
Yeah, it's just I just thought when I saw the research on it, I just thought, it would have been if they'd have known about the natural extension of the artisan temperament or the natural extension of any DOMs, then it helps to explain the contradiction with the hormones. All right. Because that also goes with the thing about what Keirsey observed, because he worked with delinquent teenagers. He trained people that would go into schools to deal with these boys that would not behave themselves in school. And so he saw it as, well, they need to do things that interest them. And of course, the things that interest them is more the kind of, okay, those kind of schoolboys are better suited to the German education system where they get moved more into things which are hands-on learning. And even Dario writes about that in his book. So it's not old thinking, it's there. Hands-on learning is what the SP is like, especially the STP is, especially ESTP. Right. Or if you do teach them abstract things, they have to know straight up front what is the practical use of it. Right. Are there any more questions?
I don't really see one.
Right. That's the thing that, somebody's written Reflections of Essence. Personality must be all genetics to some end. Well, that's why Dario talked about the Minnesota twins study. Biologists love twins because it's like they have the same DNA. And it's like, but then they look at differences. And I think Tom Condon says that he is a twin. And he talks about the differences between him and his brother. So, and he's talked about studies on twins and how they do have different Enneagram types. But Sanna might say, yes, but that relates to core issues and things. So twins do appear to have differences in various Jungian types. So although I would think from a scientific point of view, really they should be similar on a genetic level. But there is a difference between, it gets more into complex genetics. It's tricky, isn't it? Right. Are there any more questions? Right. Anyway, so we're now going to go back to the profile and we're going to talk about how idealistic INFPs are. And I just think the way that you've talked about it, Monika, is I doubt many INTPs outside the field of counseling and dealing with people would be as articulate about the subject as you. So that's further evidence of the sort of NF temperament, which is predisposed to understanding and talking about this stuff at a deep level. I mean, everyone can see what I've done in this hangout is I've abstractified it to like a functional level and gone away from the personal aspect. So there we go. Back to more NF stuff. Here we go.
Well, I think I'm so idealistic that probably I can't even speak about some of my most idealistic opinions.
Well,
because it would seem very maybe even rebellious in some way.
Yeah. What's weird is NTs can get very idealistic about libertarian things and things to do with economics, like the Ron Paul supporters. And it's like they love Ron Paul, but only the Ron Paul supporters understand Ron Paul. And so I recently did a video today. Originally, I called it Very Important. Peter Schiff debunks modern monetary theory. Was it modern monetary theory? Yes. And then I changed it to Quite Important because I thought very important was, but that's what I get very idealistic.
Oh, economics. I think it's
libertarian
evil,
stuff.
It's evil word too.
Yeah, I try to play it down a little bit. I mean, I did a little bit in that third hangout with Hannah, where we had a little bit of like, and then people should watch that third one because it's all about this paragraph, this third paragraph with Hannah, who is INFP, Enneagram Type 1. So that was a very interesting hangout, and I could tell that she was getting a little bit sensitive, so I throttled it back quite a bit with the questions. So I think that was very interesting for her. And she used to identify more as 6, then Catherine typed 2 as 1. And that was in the third hangout with Catherine Favre. Hannah's in the first hour, and it's a very good section with her. Right, so getting back to this. Healers have a profound sense of idealism, derived from a strong personal morality, and they conceive of the world as an ethical, honorable place. Indeed, to understand healers, we must understand their idealism as almost boundless and selfless, inspiring them to make extraordinary sacrifices for someone or something they believe in. What do you think of that, Monika? I mean, that kind of stuff is not in the INFJ profile.
Well, I think that I didn't see the world as an ethical place. I did see it as very...
Did you want it to be an ethical place, though?
Of course I want it, but I see it as lacking of this ethic, you know? It wasn't that I saw people as them being wrong or bad. I just couldn't understand why they are not more better or good in their behavior or in their characters.
Right. I mean, that's a general INFP theme, is they do want the world to be an ethical place. And when you've got ESTPs who are doubly conflictors, because they're conflictors in interaction style as well. So, for example, as I said before, INTP and ESFP is not as different as ESTP and INFP, because ESFP and INTP are both informing. And so you've got deeply ethical INFP with ESTP that is the most expedient and situational of the types. They would see beliefs like this. They would see somebody like this as, this person has limited beliefs. Their beliefs are limiting their freedom of action, their ability to improvise and be expedient and to make the best deal, everything being negotiable. And I know I shouldn't mention Trump all the while, but he is a clear example of ESTP in this aspect of what does FI break look like in terms of actions. Everything's up for negotiation, expedient solutions, all of those things. There's not real core to him. His core is the art of the deal. That's his core. Being expedient and ultimately flexible. And the INFP and FI valuers would look at that and say, wow, there's not a lot of principles guiding your actions, apart from the best short-term result. So you can see the difference there. Right. That was a little bit digression by me. So, but just with certain things in Keirsey, it sort of makes the functional things a little bit more manifest in terms of actions. He also wrote about the ESTP promoter, that their spouses can come to feel that they're negotiable commodities owned by them. But he did also then talked about in previous paragraphs about when the ESTP is healthy. And it sounded like the tertiary FE aspect, that's their way of development. This is interesting. Don Quixote. I agree that Don Quixote is like the archetype of INFP. There is a word out there, folks, and people can check it up. Just type in right now, if you can, quixotic. Quixotic. Let's have a look in the dictionary. What does quixotic mean? So so Auschwitz typed Don Quixote as ENTP, and even called ENTP Don Quixote. But if we look at quixotic, OPQ, quixotic, OPQ, UU, querulous, not querulous, but quixotic, QUI, idealistic and impractical. That's what it says for quixotic. Idealistic and impractical. So why Auschwitz typed Don Quixote as ENTP, I do not know.
It sounds like me, idealistic and impractical.
Yes, that's what I mean. I mean, Keirsey's got Don Quixote lifted as Keirsey INFP. So, but then again, you've got an ENTP. Their blind spot, FI, it's just like me with SE. You can't really trust people to write about about the break function, their particular break function. Medicine Man, Witch Doctor, Don Casey, Joan of Arc, isolated by the. There we go, because you were getting into the aspects of FI. Oh, FI should mean I'm great with people. Isolated by their seclusiveness and infrequency. Around 1% of the population, their idealism leaves them feeling even more isolated from the rest of humanity. Now, I suppose that is a little bit contradictory than what it said at the beginning, where it talked about them being, what was that right up here? Easygoing, gentle and easygoing. And then it's got there. Isolated by their seclusiveness and infrequency. So again, yeah, exactly. It's got it right there. Their idealism leaves them feeling even more isolated from the rest of humanity.
I don't think it's very contradictory because the note above, it was that they're going outside, but on the inside, they're not clearly understood. And this is the second note. It's they're feeling misunderstood because they're internally they're completely different. And they won't show anyone if they want to. So
you got two aspects there of FI, which has many aspects. So one of them is this sense of idealism and ethics. And the other aspect is this informing interaction style and behind the scenes in case of INFP. Because they don't want conflict with people. But again, if it trips a certain value up, once it reaches a certain threshold, then they will defend that value. But they don't like defending that value in terms of like getting a thrill out of it, like an ENTP would. Like they'll defend values that aren't even their own, just in order to train up their debating skills. But an INFP, when you see an INFP upset and defending their point of view, it doesn't look like they're enjoying it. It looks like they're doing it because they're upset, and that will fit in with the SE break. Oh, Monika, you're talking, but there's no sound.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to say that they are probably desperate when they're trying to defend themselves. It has to be really something very upsetting. To them.
Oh yes, I'll tell you that thing that Dario said. So here we go. He talked about an INFP male. He set up a dating situation with this woman with a Latin American background, and Dario was monitoring, and he saw what was going on. This guy was really interested in this woman, this INFP male, until she said that she and her family had converted to was it born again Christianity, and his activity just dropped away, and he went FI judgy and stopped listening. but before that moment, he was the best listener. So Dario said that INFPs are the best listeners until it reaches a certain threshold and then they switch off. And then he also said that ESTPs cannot switch off their listening. So it's always a little window that stays open. And then I think Morgan, Jess ESTP's son, said, I wish I could switch off my listener. And his mother's ENFP. So I think there was a point to that. Yes, it was about INFPs when they reach a certain threshold, they switch off. Also, ESI is a little bit more likely to defend their values. It's just that, anyway, this is one of the things that we talked about when we had the hangout on last Saturday with, and you'd be fantastic to join next time, Monika, if you can, next Saturday. It was with Shannon and Imogen talking about some of the ethical differences we thought we saw between Keirsey INFP and Keirsey ISFP. Because they're still ethical ISFPs, but their difference is that they value freedom so much that they don't necessarily want to impose their values or have their values become a collective thing that all society then does. Whereas INFP with their idealism would like a society where everybody gets with the program and just follows this utopian thing and work together for the common good of humanity. So it's just, there's a little temperament thing with NS being collective and cooperative, and SF and SP is being more towards the freedom aspect. So you can see how temperament is intermingled with the functions there. So temperament is good. This is why I keep doing Keirsey videos, to try and get the message across to people. And because I think that Keirsey is very much misunderstood. All right. Right then, continuity, dirty art, seclusiveness and infrequency. Right, okay. Oh. Have you talked about the seclusiveness, Monika? I'm not quite sure. I think you did.
Probably I did.
Right, okay. But see, again, INTP not as good at listening. Okay. It may be that, oh, I've done it in green, so maybe it's something to do with ethics. It may be that healers seek unity within themselves and between themselves and others. That's interesting from an Enneagram point of view.
I think it's the question of authenticity, which I was mentioning about that it's not very easy to get unity within themselves and within others. It's not easy to balance those two levels.
Yeah,
Or at least for me, maybe someone is perfectly capable of this, but it's still a hard thing for me to do.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose this is one of the slight differences between this profile and MBTI, because as Sanna said, that MBTI FE focuses a lot on harmony. And when you look at this is a little bit more like ethics of relations than MBTI FE, because this does mention the unity, harmony aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Socionics, harmony is basically FE-SI or FI-SI.
Yeah.
Those are going to be looking for harmonious interactions the most.
In fact, Victor has, I think he added FI to the harmonizing subtype, and he believes that that is with accentuated NI, SI, or FI. He added FI to it. The version that's on Wikisocion just has those related to the I little p temperament mindset of NI and SI, but he added FI.
Yeah, I don't think gamma types are necessarily going to be so much into, I mean, they're obviously FI valuing, but it's not the same kind of
it's
harmony.
about freedom. Yeah. Yeah, that gets...
Beta, definitely not.
Yeah, it gets captured by Keirsey as well, because what I said about the SFP is they value in freedom so much. And I've heard gamma values talked about is that they are very much independent, those four, from a gamma point of view, from what I've heard of descriptions.
I've seen a lot of people that are FE valuing in MBTI think that they're going to be beta in Socionics. And it's just like, okay, you're not if this is how you approach, if this is about what you value. I think many of them end up being alpha or especially delta.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it'd be good when we do more hangouts with Raquel, because she's sort of both, where she does get directive, but she also very much is into the positions of other people. And she talks about this in
Hangouts. Same. I mean, you can do all that without. The thing about beta quadra is that it's it's not so afraid of resolving things with conflict.
Right. But I think
doesn't mean that everybody wants to, obviously, but it's not afraid of it as much as.
Yeah. But a thing to go with me, folks, is when I talk about, I don't read the MBTI profiles. I read the Keirsey profiles and the ones with Nardi and Berens. So
you don't, but people think that you do. So.
But there's certain things that correlate. But that's people should remember. I'm going with. Okay, you've got to leave in 10 minutes. Okay, right. So anyway, we're only going to get through half of it anyway, because it's just going to be like what happened with the ISFPs. We only got halfway through, so we could do a part 2. So what about you talked about that? Yes, you talked about that, and that's probably going to vary by Enneagram. Which Enneagram types do you think are going to do most with the unity inside themselves, Monika?
Can you repeat that question?
My question is, do you think certain Enneagram types for INFP would be more focused on the unity within themselves and between themselves and others? Is that E9?
I think it will be Enneagram 9, mostly.
Yeah. And then we're going to see if this fits you. INFPs live a fantasy-filled childhood.
And adulthood, I guess.
I would also like to say that I think Enneagram 6 would also, to some degree, want to fit in at least.
Yeah. Yeah, and
it'll be from 9, but
yeah. Yes, because they worry about things.
Yeah, 6 when they are not counterphobic, probably. When they are counterphobic, it will be more against other people, and they won't be so concerned by fitting in.
They also doubt what they know, so they continually, again, as a head type, they continually learn. Maybe play devil's advocate against what they already know. Because because even the phobic ones will have that counterphobic element to them of wanting to test that the authorities are right about something, because they have that doubt about them. And that will fit in quite nicely with ESI, with the ESI 6s, with that negative FI and negative overall. Oh, it also fits in with the form of cognition of holographic panoramic for ESI, where they like to look at things from different angles.
Which is interesting, considering they have any polar.
I know, it's weird. I think Victor wrote that they like to look at a person from different angles to sort of like get a sense of their moral core. That's something we can discuss with the ISFP resemblers next week.
Well, if they are ESI, yeah.
Yeah, well, Shannon relates to that. Go on, Monika.
I was just reading through this, what you're showing there, and I think that this is about interjection of feeling guilt, and this is so Enneagram 4.
Yeah, that's the thing with these. I mean, this is something that Jonathan would say, this bit sounds, and that's what I would like to do with him. We did it with ISFJ, where we went through it and he said, this bit sounds like 6, this bit sounds like self-preservation. And we could do that with Jonathan, where he goes, this bit sounds more like 9, this more like 4, more like 6, that kind of thing.
I think a lot of this stuff on this page is actually very 6-ish.
Well, in trying to be pleasing, it's success, but in introjection, the guilt for how they are different and feeling the guilt, it's more like near for the guilt part. And
Yeah.
so Enneagram 9, that they are trying to be invisible and whatever, I just do whatever you wish. It could be also 9 or 2, you try to be pleasing to all of needs around.
So, one of the words you said there, Monika, did you say introjection?
Yes.
Right. I'm not quite sure what that means, and I'm prepared to admit that. How are you? What do you mean by introjection?
I hope that the word exists.
Well, I will have a look in the dictionary while you try and explain it.
Okay.
This is not to pull you up. Generally, I'm a little bit vague on what it means, introjection. Or does it mean like
I think it
like
means
introject something into
that you take the guilt inside of you, and that you
right.
make the feelings of yours, and that you absorb it to yourself, and it's like it's coming from you, but in fact it's coming from others. It's opposite to projection.
Yeah, the
Right.
official Google dictionary definition: the unconscious adoption of the ideas or attitudes of others.
Right. That sounds 9-ish. Contradict me if I'm wrong.
Sounds
Correct me.
humanish. I mean, everybody does that.
Certain types more likely than others.
Certain types are just more aware of it than others.
I think you maybe, I don't know if you talked about this. Have you talked about doing this at some point, Sanna, publicly? I'm not sure. Maybe I should mention that. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, about this taking things on from other people and then waiting till you, before you came over, become more your own person, more solid with your own sense of self.
I'm trying to remember what this what the context of this conversation was, because it does sound like something I would talk about, but I can't remember.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, because I couldn't quite remember. Did you say it in public or was that in a private conversation? Because I know you talked about it privately, but I didn't know if you talked about it publicly.
I don't know. Remind me.
Yeah. Because what you said earlier on to Monika, where you said, "Oh, it took you until about 30 to realize something that she knew."
Oh yeah, that was about empathetically feeling other people's emotions or other. It wasn't even necessarily always people's. It was sometimes like a more collective thing. And it took me until I was 30 before I figured out the concept that this could even be happening.
Right.
Because I didn't have, any tool like this to tell me that it's a thing.
Right. So, Monika has to go soon. So, what about this bit? Other types may shrug off parental expectations that do not fit them, but not the INFPs.
You want me to comment, I guess.
Well, you could really water it down in order so that the video stays up.
Yeah, I think that maybe in some personal settings I could answer, but
I think you've given enough information. You relate to that. That's enough. What about this? Seeing themselves as ugly ducklings.
I will just say that
I assume it means on like a psychological different level of like, oh, I feel different from everybody else, and you have to sort of wait to come into your own. I think that's what it means.
oh yes, definitely the whole childhood and the whole adolescence, I had this feeling, and other people they were told me too that I was so different. So I guess it wasn't only my feeling, but also other people's.
I don't know if that's INFP specific, because, well, I went through the same thing as well, and I think it's more Enneagram 4.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Not Keirsey type.
Yeah. And also part of them would like to see themselves as ugly because, like, when the 4 gets unhealthy.
Well, it's a coping mechanism, because when you're told that you're different, that you're weird, you kind of turn it around and you start taking pride in it as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, because it's the best way you can do. You can hate yourself for it, or you can turn it the best what you can get.
You have to choose. Either you feel crap or you're gonna, take pride in it. And if you're 4, you're gonna take pride in it.
It's like the difference between eccentric and weird. I'm not weird, I'm eccentric.
Well, I've heard all those. Artsy, that's another way of putting it. It's like, if somebody actually thinks I'm weird, but they like me, then they call me artsy.
I mean, NPs get that a lot. They're called weird, especially by SPs, because the NE weirds them out. Because it's like, where did that come from?
I think a lot of types get it, to be honest. That's why I'm saying I don't think it's so much about this. I think when you're 4, you just remember it and you identify with it, and somebody else might not even remember it later.
Yeah, especially if they're like INFP 4. Although that's a broad statement to make that INFP 4s feel it more than INFJ 4s.
Yeah, I think it's only 4. I honestly don't think it's related to the...
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Yep. Oh, that's a little bit cheeky. Swans weird in a family of ducks. But I get the point. Again, so it is returning to that theme of alienation. So, yeah. So we can probably stop there. So I'll write down that we've got up to paragraph 4. I'll just colour in those green squares, unless it's already been done. Oh, I've already coloured them in. Darn it, I'll just have to remember. Got up to paragraph 4. Right then. Are there any more questions to answer? Oh, wait a minute. I need to say goodbye to Monika, unless you've been given an extension.
I think it's everything for now.
Okay. So should I stop recording now, Monika?
Yes, probably.
Okay. There we go. Bye-bye, folks. I think this has been a very good hangout with some very good questions from the audience and highlighting some differences in the way INFP and INFJ resemblers in Keirsey take a different approach to helping people on one-to-one level.